Welcome back to another GR8 podcast episode. I think we're on like 33, 34, something like that. Thank you guys for sticking around, hanging out with me and hearing what my thoughts about sports, comics, movies. Don't matter. We're having another movie review, although I don't know if this is going to be me reviewing the movie, rather me just talking about the movie and its surrounding elements. So we're going to take about 5, 10, 15 minutes. I'm going to try to keep this short as I can, because I think I'm going to come out with a real YouTube video about this. I probably will, because this movie has been in my head for the last a year or whatever, and then now it's finally come out, and this weekend I've seen it twice, and I'm just, I don't know. I don't know. I have so many thoughts, and I just want to get them out, page, put it all out in a podcast episode, say it all with my voice, and upload it to YouTube and Spotify. So thank you guys so much, and we'll get right into it. So listen, let's get the elephant out of the room, or the elephant in the room. Let's get him out. Ezra Miller. Okay. He stars in The Flash. Okay. There's actually two Barry Allens. There's two Ezra Millers. And with somebody that's so controversial as Ezra Miller, especially in the last several years, especially in the last year, it's kind of funny that this movie not only has one Ezra Miller, but two of them. It's almost like if you didn't like Ezra Miller, you're really not going to like him here. But I think he does a great job as Barry Allen, a great job as the Flash. He has a lot of comedic tones and elements to his acting chops. I really like it. And his emotional beats, his ability to cry and give that one single tear, but you know exactly what he's feeling and thinking about within his eyes. But the fact that he is a very controversial, to say the least, person outside the movie set. Let's just get into it. Let's just get into it. I'm sick of beating around the bush. Ezra Miller has done a lot of terrible and weird, goofy, dumb life decisions, okay, in last year, okay? He has changed his pronouns, and he went to Hawaii to beat up a couple people, and then he blamed it on mental issues, and then he got arrested for several other things. Apparently he got in like bar fights, spit on people, calling people names and things of that nature. And then like I said, he eventually got arrested, and now I think currently he's on probation or something along those lines, but still able to come to the Flash premiere. Everybody says, yikes. Everybody's pointing at Ezra Miller. What are you doing? Why are you making all these bad decisions? You're making DC look bad, as you know, they're already like in the sewers with this whole Flash catastrophe, and then now they're having Ezra Miller act like a fool. Listen, I have a couple points about this. First one is that everything that I've heard and everything that I just said that he's done, I've heard about on Twitter. I've heard about on YouTube, okay? I don't watch the nightly news. I don't watch the daily news. I don't hop on my local news network to hear about what Ezra Miller's doing. I think you and I both have better things to do. So the reason that I'm saying this is that I've got all of these things from Twitter. Somebody on Twitter could just make something up. just completely just randomly start saying something about Ezra Miller. Say, Ezra Miller did this. And everybody seemingly on Twitter would just, okay, he did that. He's a terrible person. Not the most reliable source. However, I know that there's got to be some truth to these allegations and some truth to multiple of these reports. Okay. The second thing that I'll say is that these are actors in Hollywood, in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, California. Okay. Let me. When did you start getting your moral compass from actors? Just like the John Morant conversation. Why are we getting our moral compass from sports stars? These people are, first of all, just people. And second, get paid millions of dollars to do something that is not useful for the human race. They're there to entertain. And when you're told every single day that you're here to entertain, by the way, here's a couple $1 billion, here's a couple $1 million, $1 billion, you start to be like, oh, okay, of course they would go act out. Of course they would be weird. Of course, a lot of people in Hollywood are in, children and pedophilia and have done terrible things and terrible crimes. I bet you look up just the list of Jeffrey Epstein's airplane log or whatever. All those people, there's so many people on it, and yet we still go see their movies. Like nothing's stopping us from seeing their movies, like Tom Hanks and a bunch of other people. No, it doesn't matter. It only matters when it comes to Ezra Miller. It only matters when it comes to superhero movies. It only matters when it comes to Warner Brothers. Why does it only matter to Ezra Miller, who, yes, has done terrible and weird and goofy things, but he's the only one that we're holding this standard to? Why, of all people, are we looking at the long list of Hollywood actors that have done incomprehensible things, but we're looking at Ezra Miller, all of them, but we pick out Ezra Miller to be like, no, I'm not going to go support your movie because Ezra Miller is terrible. And that kind of moves me into more people actually have worked on this movie than just Ezra Miller. I hope you guys know that, right? I hope the people listening, if there are any people listening, there are more people that work on this movie than just him. Granted, he is on every single poster. He is at the top of the credits. He is, he's main character of the story. He's the main protagonist. But let me just tell you just one little thing. On the credits, the whole long list of them, it says Ezra Miller at the top. Barry Allen / Ezra Miller. Barry Allen / The Flash - Ezra Miller. And then after that, until the very end of the credits, 5 minutes later, is everybody not named Ezra Miller. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of other people that have worked on this movie and have worked on other movies that starred Ezra Miller, that had Ezra Miller in the movies. There are tons of other people that have worked on movies, good or bad people, it don't matter, that have worked on movies above or below movies that star terrible people. There's more people that work on these movies, VFX artists, directors, producers, editors, sound effects artists. All these other people work on these movies, not just Ezra Miller. It's incredible to hear people say, I'm not going to go see that movie. I'm not going to go support Ezra Miller. But you could support the VFX artist that lives in Vietnam that worked on this movie because he was underpaid by Warner Brothers. You could go do that. You didn't think about that one, did you? Because your whole point is Ezra Miller, Ezra Miller, Ezra Miller. I can't go support him, even though there's tons of other people that have worked on this art. And yes, movie is an art, and that's my next point. Separate the art from the artist as much as you can. We cannot keep saying separate the art from the artist, till the end of time. Adolf Hitler was a artist, like a painter, before he became what he is known for today. If we look back and looked at Adolf Hitler's paintings, sure, they could be nice, but are we going to support that because you're supporting the person that made that in a weird form and view, right? However, as much as you can, as much as you're morally obligated to in your own personal life, separate the art from the artist. The art has a completely different and new meaning every time that somebody looks at it than what the artist maybe has, given it to, made it for. Separate the art from the artist. I can separate The Flash as a superhero comic book movie starring Ezra Miller, Michael Keaton, and various other actors. And then I can also acknowledge that Ezra Miller is a bad person. All of them are. But Ezra Miller is a bad person. And I can separate those two things. I can go see the movie and support everybody else except Ezra Miller. But that's in my head, So that's just like as much as you can support people that you agree with, right? But sometimes you inadvertently support people that you disagree with. And that's what I'm saying. Separate the art from the artist as much as you can. So that was 10 minutes of me talking about that, because those are several points that I just needed to say. Now this is where the quote unquote review starts. I guess that was like one big point about Ezra Miller. The second one big point is the CGI. And everybody says the CGI looks bad. Yes, it does. I don't have anything else to say other than yes, it does. There's a lot of shots that it looks terrible, and there's a lot of shots that, that there's no way that could have just been done on camera. So that had to have been computer generated and actually looked kind of good. So there's shots that do look good and shots that do not look good. When there's specific atmospheres and elements and plot spaces where the CGI is in full force, a lot of times it does not look good. It looks like completely computer generated images that were like half baked, half rendered, and they just sent it out. That is not good. And there's not a really big excuse for that, because this movie has been in development for almost like 10 years, okay? Under a lot of different writers, or under a lot of different directors, under a lot of different pre-production plans and whatnot, even during production and then after post-production. 100%, the CGI does not look good at a lot of the times. However, to counter that, I will say that the CGI in a movie should not, I'm going to say something very controversial, should not ever be the first thing that somebody looks at when critiquing a movie. Because a movie, in hindsight, overall, is a story. And if the story is conveyed in emotional, compelling, various ways through emotional and compelling characters driving an emotional and compelling plot, then the CGI on the totem pole of things that are actually needed for a movie is at the bottom for me, okay? A movie could look absolutely terrible, but you tell me a story, a deeply relatable story about somebody that is grieving the loss of their mother and trying any way possible to get her back, but eventually realizing that it's okay to let go, not forget, but let go of the grief and the pain that he has been living with his entire life. That's the story of The Flash. That's why I loved it so much. I should have told you that earlier. That's why I loved it so much. And that one little spiel, did I mention the CGI at all? Did I mention the CGI at all? Now, when the CGI becomes distracting, that's when I start, okay, like I get it, 100%. But is the CGI really distracting, or are you staring at it trying to critique it as much as you possibly can? Are you saying, oh, I need to look at every single last frame of this movie trying to figure out, does that foot go that way? Does his face actually look like that? The CGI is bad 100%, and there's a lot of places that it looks terrible. There's a lot of green screen effects, a lot of visual effects, a lot of computer generated scenes that just do not look good, okay? However, I will 100% say that the CGI is very, very low on the totem pole of things that are important in movies. There are hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of movies that have been made throughout the history of mankind that have not used computer generated images. And they tell a great, compelling, and emotional, relatable story. It's just when we get to action scenes that literally cannot be done in camera, do we start having to use CGI. And whether that looks good, whether that looks bad, I will 100% always champion for it does not matter in the grand scheme of things. Now, when a movie is really, really good, right? When a movie is great characters, great story, great plot, great execution, and all the other facets, all great editing, good direction, good acting. And then the one, critique and nitpick about it is that the CGI and the visual effects look bad. That's when we can start having that conversation, I guess. 100%, because, you know, everything else is good, but the CGI, what happened with that? That's probably my own critique. However, the critiques of the visual effects should not ever hinder somebody's legitimate feelings about the plot, about the way that they were moved, about the way that they were affected by the movie. If the computer generated images in a superhero action movie really affect you so much that it makes you physically angry and not enjoy a movie as much as somebody possibly could, then you need to start thinking about how you actually critique stories. Again, I'm saying you can critique stories as whatever way that you deem possible or whatever way that you deem necessary. I don't care. Go ahead. These are just my thoughts. I just do not think that the CGI is something to bash about. Oh, look at this. This looks terrible. Okay, 100%. I get that. VFX artists weren't given enough time and weren't paid much. So that's really a story on Warner Brothers. And if that's why you're complaining, then heck yeah, go ahead. Go against the company that pushed this and rushed this movie out without completing CGI effects and models and whatnot. 100%. But when you start bashing like the director, when you start bashing the story, when you start bashing like the movie as a whole in front of you, and when it becomes actually legitimately distracting and like affecting your brain, that's when I'm starting to think, whoa, easy there, pump the brakes, pal. It's low on the totem pole of things that actually matter. And that's where I will get to the story. And I kind of, briefly talked about it in my, that last point. But my third and final point is the story. So I can talk about the story of the DC movies up until this point and then where they're going from here. I can talk about Ezra Miller and his story with the Justice League movies and the DC movies and his own personal life. I could talk about the weird random cameos that, don't really affect the story in a whole lot, but are in the story and in the movie. What I will say is that I was deeply, deeply moved from the risks that this movie took. The ability to tell a deeply compelling story about somebody's grief and loss. Because if you watch the movie or you know anything about The Flash, Barry Allen, The Flash, is a forensic scientist. He became a forensic scientist to right the wrongs of the justice system that failed him and his father and his mother. His mother died of a freak accident. In the comics, it's actually by Reverse Flash, but that isn't really expounded upon in the movie. She just has a knife in her stomach, and his father is blamed for it. His mom dies, and his dad goes to jail because everybody thinks that his dad did it. He's convinced that he did not. So him trying to reverse this event in his life through grief and through not thinking through actions and his unwillingness to listen and understand everything that would, happen, all these events that would actually take place, like the colliding of the multiverse, he chooses to go back in time and try to fix it. How it happens is his mom forgets a can of tomatoes at the grocery store, so she tells his dad to go to the grocery store to go pick up another can of tomatoes. Barry's upstairs, mom is downstairs, she gets stabbed, and the dad is away because he was going to go get a can of tomatoes, comes back and sees his wife that's been stabbed. Barry goes back in time, gets the can of tomatoes that she had forgotten and puts it in the shopping cart. And that's what, sets off the rest of the movie. He goes back in time, a second Flash, another Batman, Supergirl, whatever. At the end of the movie, he's faced with the consequences of all of his actions that he has made up until this point, going back in time, changing up the multiverse, trying to, distort space-time. And he's told, Barry, you have to go back and accept it and let go. And what he does, and he sees the pain and the colliding of the multiverses. And he says, okay. So he goes back in time again, watches his former self put the tomato can in the shopping cart. He goes up to his mom and obviously interacts with her because it was a younger version of this timeline. So it was actually that his mom would not actually recognize him because his mom had not died yet, and he had not grown up yet, and little Barry was still technically back at the house. He comes up to her and says, like, I'm here visiting my mom. It starts like small talk with her. And he starts crying because he's right in front of his mother, and his mother, the kindest person alive, he claims, starts hugging him and saying, it's okay. And he starts like going in slow motion because he's moving so fast, and he's walking, everything around him is frozen, and he starts walking. He looks in the shopping cart and gets the can of tomatoes, picks it up, takes it out of the shopping cart, knowing what he has to do, puts it in his pocket, and goes back to his mom and says, what they've been saying the whole movie is, I love you most, I love you first, I love you, Mom. And it goes back to normal time, and he's still crying, and he says, thank you, or whatever he says, turns around and walks away. And he puts the can of tomatoes back on the shelf. I love that. I start getting choked up like just talking about it because of how much it means to me. I haven't lost a parent. I haven't, felt that sort of pain or anything along those lines in my life, but I could 100% feel and see how something like that could affect somebody. I went and saw it with my mom, my mom and my dad. And my dad's a little bit more critical about like action scenes, whatever. But my mom is a little bit more sensitive to the emotional sides of it. And what she said is she loved the movie because of the human aspects of it. How Batman earlier in the movie says, well, Michael Keaton's Batman says, when my parents died, I lost a part of myself. In trying to work through the pain and grief, I became something else. And that's like the whole point of Barry Allen, is he became a hero because of the pain that he endured. I've become eventually the villain of the story because I cannot cope with what has happened in my life. So him making the decision, instead of keep on trying, keep on doing whatever he possibly can to save his mom. And obviously there's some sci-fi elements that, his mom dying is actually like an event that needed to happen or whatever. It's kind of like Spider-Man, the canon event, something that needs to happen. He goes back in time, looks at his mom and says, I'm sorry, but I love you. Takes the can of tomatoes, something small and so stupid as the can of tomatoes, picks it up and takes it out of the cart. Now, this is not him actually killing his mom. This is him allowing circumstances to happen for his mom to die. And him understanding that consequence allows him to move past the grief, move past the shame, move past of all the pain and every other thing that he has endured and been affected by and experienced, and says, it's okay. I will not forget you, but I have to move on. I love that. Every single little bit about that I love. I cannot get enough. All of the stuff about Ezra Miller, all the stuff about the CGI, all the bantering on Twitter about how this is a terrible movie and how like James Gunn just needs to retire and it doesn't matter about any of the DCU. I'm sure like my friends didn't really like it. They saw all the, action parts of it and thought they were goofy. Sure, Supergirl is a very undeveloped character. Sure, Michael Keaton coming back as Batman is just fan service, and they have tons of fan service bringing back old and dead characters from the past DC movies, the past DC multiverse, like Christopher Reeves and Adam West Batman and other things like that, trying to just get a hoorah out of fans. The lame, stupid fan service, but at the center of this story was a very, very compelling story about somebody that is grieving and moving past it, moving through it, working through it. I love it. I loved it. I loved The Flash. All the action scenes, They're goofy. As simple as that. They're goofy. They're goofy action scenes. You have a Dragon Ball Z fight between Supergirl and General Zod. You have Batman shooting planes out of the sky in his Batwing, and then you have two Flashes going around punching Kryptonians. At some point, you got to be like, okay, I'm suspending disbelief. Okay, this is what's happening. But at the core of the story is Barry Allen accepting the death of his mother. I loved it. I can't give it a rating because of how many things are surrounding it. It really feels like a comic book movie, the most comic book movie ever, that kind of like on live action, because there's, animated like in Spider-Man Into and Across the Spider-Verse, who are actually the best comic book movies ever. But this live action movie just it scratches every itch for me. Goofy fun with a lot of cool action and a very, very heartfelt story at the core of it. I loved it. Please go see The Flash. Please go see what I have seen. And obviously, I'm not trying to convince you of any way, shape, and form. I'm just saying that there is there's more to this movie than what your friends have said, and there's more to this movie than what Twitter has said, okay? Please go see the movie, form your own opinion, and pay attention to the movie. Don't get hung up on CGI. Don't get hung up on Ezra Miller and how bad and weird of a guy he is. Just absorb the movie as much as you possibly can and enjoy it for yourself, okay? Make your own opinion. I appreciate you guys listening, hanging out with me, talking about The Flash. Probably like this hill I think I'm willing to die on. This is the only hill in my life that I'm willing to die on, is The Flash, and how goofy and fun but personal and emotional it was. I loved it. It was not afraid to slow down and tell you things about characters. It had multiple different things of people trying to explain stuff and why they were there and things that were happening. All of that stuff, it's fine. It's goofy. And I probably will, be mad at it in the future. And I probably will have been mad at it, of all the stuff that I praise in this movie. I probably have been mad at it in the past and probably will be mad at it in the future. But it's okay, because I try to look at every single movie differently. And hopefully this is something that I can also do with this movie. I don't even know what I'm saying at this point. Go watch the movie. I love you guys. Thank you guys for hanging out with me, rocking with me, hearing my voice, talking about The Flash. I appreciate you guys. We're going on 30 minutes here. It's a little bit longer episode because I'm very passionate about this type of stuff. Thank you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.